International Court of Justice is the world's court, and its legal predecessor was established in 1920. Now, the International Court of Justice takes on disputes of a legal nature, which are submitted to it by states. In the current case, the jurisdiction of the ICJ is grounded on the Genocide Convention of 1948. South Africa has submitted the case to the ICJ against Israel, alleging that Israel has committed genocide. It has also failed to punish genocide, and it has failed to prevent a genocide from being committed against the Palestinian people. Before going into the details of the case, I wanted to take a little bit of a step back and talk about the history of why it is so important that it is South Africa bringing this case to the International Court of Justice, alleging that Israel has committed genocide. Now, South Africa is a non-Arab, non-Muslim member of the United Nations, and one which has had a history of apartheid and a history of a system of brutal settler colonialism. Now, Israel collaborated very, very closely. It had a close military alliance with South Africa's apartheid regime under the worst years of white rule. And they even collaborated very closely on building a nuclear weapons program. Now, once apartheid was overcome and overthrown, the African National Congress came into power. And the African National Congress enjoyed such close ties with the Palestinian Liberation Organization that they were even referred to as fraternal ties. Yasser Arafat was one of the first foreign leaders to address South Africa's newly democratic parliament. And Mandela, in a number of the statements he'd made about Palestine, said that South Africa's struggle and the Palestinian struggle was one and the same. Now, coming to the current case that South Africa has filed before the ICJ, looking at the legal team that South Africa has, it is being headed by John Dugard, who is an eminent South African jurist. And he is known as one of the few white judges to stand up against apartheid rule. And he was also UN Special Rapporteur in the 2000s for Palestine. And while being Special Rapporteur, he made a comment that the apartheid practice in Palestine was actually far worse than that practice in South Africa. Now, looking at the document, looking at the written proceedings filed before the ICJ, these run to 84 pages long, and they are incredibly detailed, incredibly well documented and chronicled allegations against Israel that it has committed genocide. And these are evidenced by all of these 84 pages of acts and the intent. So when we look at genocide, let's look at the definition of genocide. Genocide is the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, racial, religious, or ethnic group. The most important part of that definition is that intent to destroy. We refer to that as a special intent. So it is incredibly difficult to prove that special intent to destroy. So South Africa has alleged that Israel has committed genocidal acts. These include the killing of Palestinians, causing serious bodily and mental harm, and also inflicting upon them conditions of life calculated to bring about their physical destruction. And that it has done so with this special intent. Now, there are pages upon pages in South Africa's submission which detail this special intent as evidenced by statements from the president, the prime minister, the minister of defense, members of the Israeli Defense Forces, and also statements from top government officials. And in doing so, South Africa is building the case that Israel has violated its obligations under the Genocide Convention of 1948. When it comes to how strong this case is, we have very recent precedent from the International Court of Justice, because South Africa has alleged that in its preliminary orders, because it is very important to remember that the court is not now deciding whether genocide has been committed. What South Africa is asking for is what domestically you might refer to as an injunction, an interim measure, which is to say that the risk of this being committed against Palestinian people and the irreparable prejudice and the sense of urgency means that we need an injunction right now before you even decide whether this is genocide. And South Africa has requested that Israel halt its military operation, and also that it stop its commission of genocide. So we have two cases which have done these two, in which the ICJ has issued preliminary orders on both of these issues very recently. So when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, the ICJ ordered that Russia had to halt its military operation. When it comes to the Gambia versus Myanmar, where the Gambia has alleged that Myanmar has committed genocide against the Rohingya Muslims, the ICJ has also ordered there that it had to halt the genocide, that it had to also ensure that it did not destroy the evidence, and it had to report before the court. So all eyes will be on the International Court of Justice in the public hearings in the next couple of days, and also in the preliminary measures to see whether it gives that injunction. So the difficult thing with the ICJ is that it doesn't have its own enforcement mechanism. However, under Article 94 of the UN Charter, the Security Council can issue a resolution which orders a state to comply with the ICJ's rulings. Unfortunately, America is one of the permanent 5 members of the UN Security Council, and it is likely to use its veto to protect Israel from such a resolution. So in that case, what could happen? The General Assembly can, under the Uniting for Peace resolution, take this out of the Security Council and put it within the General Assembly, and it can issue a resolution directing that Israel comply with the ICJ's provisional orders. Even in such a case, it is still going to be likely that Israel might not comply. So really the onus and the pressure will be on the international community to act, to impose that pressure on Israel to try and force it to succumb and to comply with the ICJ's ruling. Ironically, it is the very state which is taking Israel to task, which has been victim to this in the past. There were a number of pronouncements by the ICJ against South Africa during its time of apartheid, during its time of colonial rule, especially when it comes to Namibia. There are a number of pronouncements about its unlawful occupation, about its apartheid regime, and the fact that the international community, the ICJ, requested it to come together and to not recognize the illegal acts created by South Africa's unlawful creation of their situation, and also to try and force South Africa to stop committing these acts. And so really what we're looking to is for the ICJ to now give us that moral and that legal weight, and to fulfill the aspiration for a legitimate legal order. So all eyes are on the International Court of Justice right now.